were you a devout Catholic, or what did that story look like?
I was, I went to church, I was lukewarm. I think that may be an overstatement. Maybe, maybe room temperature Catholic, by definition, if I check the box.
The world would say, first off, that's too many. But if you have 5 kids, there's no way you can be successful in business, or you have to sacrifice your family to be successful in business. How do you respond to that? Or how did you experience that?
I don't really like to golf that much. I don't like to smoke cigars. I don't, people with brown liquor, it kind of scares me. It makes me nauseous, But I found that I made it was not a hard decision. It was an easy decision. I said, the only thing I'm ever going to do is I'm going to either be working and advancing the ball for the family, or I'm going to be home. Okay. Those are the only 2 places I'll be.
Hey everyone, we are so blessed to be here at Catholics at the Shore. I'm so grateful for Chris McMahon here with me. It was his invitation that brought me here so that we could do these in-person recordings. Father Boniface Hicks was on earlier. Now we have Chris here today. It is such a blessing. Please keep us in your prayers. Before we dive into this episode, where we're going to be talking about investing, we're going to be talking about living a life fully devoted to God while having successful businesses and successful careers. What? I mean, these things seem so disruptive and so, antithetical of what our lives are called to be, but we're going to set some of that straight. I can't wait to dive in there. Before we do that, hit that like and subscribe button. We are giving away free rosaries for all new annual subscriptions to Catholic Gentleman Plus. So head over to CatholicGentlemanPlus.com. We're so grateful for you being here. Chris, what a joy.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for coming to our conference, and thanks for all the work you do. I admire it so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, it is a blessing to be here. What joy, what graces God has. I got to walk in a great Eucharistic procession yesterday. That was really beautiful. I don't know if you know this, but it was Father Boniface Hicks's anniversary as a priest.
I heard that this morning. I heard it this morning. So we got to think about that a little bit more tonight at dinner and make a little bit bigger deal out of it. Sure.
Agreed. What a joy. So you have been investing for 35 years plus?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's a long time to be in investing. That's a long time to growing and discerning wealth management and starting companies. And I know you have 5 incredible kids, but I want to hear from you. What is inspiring you today? What is keeping you awake at night, or what is exciting you about getting up?
That's a great question. It's funny because, I used to think when you got to be 58, 59, and I had a big birthday about 5 months ago that hurt a little bit, and I said, 60, you're kind of on the back, the back 5 yards, you're in the end of the fourth quarter. And I never felt that way. I'm a pretty energized, high energy person. And I think what's happened is, it's kind of exciting to me because our firm, as you said, I had a secular investment firm, still do, for about 35 years, where we gathered assets. And I started out of a big company years and years ago in financial planning and built my own registered investment advisory firm. And then was having a lot of success, thank God. But we were secular, we were siloed. We didn't really talk about faith much. They used to tell us that as recently as 15 years ago. And you'll hear some people still say, don't talk about politics and don't talk about faith.
Yeah, of course.
And what I realized was that we were ending up with people who didn't look like us. Our deepest relationships in our firm, people, we shared the same values. We had the people I admired tremendously, people of great faith, people of great character, people I wanted to aspire to be like. So much like in the regular world, they tell you to pick role models and do what they do. And I did it unintentionally. Okay. I said, geez, all these people that I love so much are just great husband, great fathers, great wives, great mothers, that I just said, I love being around these people. I aspire to be like these people. And I realized our life, Molly's, and my life over time with those 5 kids, we were busy for quite a while, but over time as we came up for air, I got super involved with Legatus. I was the vice chair for years. I got a chance to spend a ton of time with Tom Monahan, which was a great experience for me, because I see him and the success he had and how empty it was for him until he really gave his life to God. That was very important to me to see that for sure. And as I said, what am I doing with my life, and how can I better align make actual, intentionality about it, try to be intentional to build a business around the faith and really try to give back. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Molly and I got deeply connected to the Sisters of Life. We got deeply connected with the Sisters of Mary in Mexico City. We actually opened a maternity home, you mentioned, in Pittsburgh called Mary's Place. Yes. And the more of the stuff we did, the more graces that came to us, and also the more we became, comfortable in our own skin. And that's probably a little bit about becoming a little bit older. When you're 25 and 35, like many of the listeners, you're thinking to yourself, I need to conform to what other people are saying about me. I need to present myself in a way that's consistent with the image either that they've told me or the image that I think it's supposed to be. And what ends up happening is you find yourself putting on masks in your workplace, in your personal life, or pretending to like things that you don't like. And I think it's really important to listen. I think it's the Holy Spirit. You have to listen to that earlier. If I had a recommendation to go back to the 30-year-old Chris McMahon, I'd say, listen, you need to listen a little bit sooner. My bride always says, Molly, she says, don't judge the man by the boy. And I love that expression because she knew me when I was a boy, and I was a boy far too long. And I think if anybody's hearing us, it says, I'm a boy.
Yeah.
It just brick by brick, they can become a man. They just
Amen.
have to.
You're not born a man.
You're not born a man. And guess what? A lot of us don't have good role models.
Agreed.
So just pick a couple of role models and start doing what they do. Amen. And brick by brick, you build that integrity wall. And all of a sudden, you can be the kind of guy you're proud of. I always like to do that, make a list of what are the things I do that I'm not proud of.
Excellent.
And what do I do that I'm not proud of? What are the things I do that my children, if they knew about me, I'd be ashamed? Or my wife knew about me, I'd be ashamed. Wow. And I put it down on paper. It's really hard to do that, right? Because sometimes the list can be long. But if you start to work towards that and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to write that list every month. And guess what? You want less stuff on the list. It's not that complicated. Right? And I think that's a very important thing. And if you make the decision, or if you live in a way, you say the opinion of my wife's opinion of me is the most important opinion of anybody on the planet, right? Yeah. So how can I act in a way that would be consistent with her being proud of me? And if my children heard this or saw how I was acting, how would they feel about me?
What a great example. What a great self-examination. I've heard it stated that, picture your life as a movie, stand away as if you're watching it. And are you proud of where you're at and where you're going? Can you tell how the movie's going to end based off of what you're doing right now? And what a blessing. So before you got into starting your own company, were you a devout Catholic, or what did that story look like?
No, I'd say my mother, God bless her. When I talk a lot, I'm fortunate to do a lot of media, and I do a lot of stuff now, and I talk a lot. When I give talks, I show a picture of the four of us. We're four of us. I'm the youngest of four, and we all look cute as can be. It's like 1971, and we're all sitting there lined up in a picture, and it looks like a normal, cute little kid picture from 1971. But I tell the story that picture was taken. Literally, it was the last piece of furniture in the house because we were on the piano bench as my mother was moving to divorce my father to move back to Pittsburgh from Washington, D.C., because my father had very struggles with alcohol. And struggles with being a good father. He was not a good father. He was very absent, very old, and very kind of detached, and had a lot of struggles. I'm glad to report that in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, in my 50s, I was able to start praying for him, which I never thought to do before.
That forgiveness was able to hit you.
Yeah, because I realized how blessed I am. I look around and go, how did this happen? And I like to say it was more intentional than it was, that God blessed us, but it's God's grace. God's grace has blessed us with a spouse who to a large degree can help us, right? And save us. And then all these beautiful children and these abundance of just joy. But I think that's what happened when they took that photograph. We got in the car, we came back to Pittsburgh. Really only saw my dad a few more times before he passed away when I was 5 years old, I think, and 6 years old. No, I was probably 8 when he passed away. Yeah. But so my mother struggled to raise us. She did everything she could, and she did a great job. Wow. I look at my siblings and think how blessed we all are to be, and my mother's still with us, how blessed we all are to have had her as a mother and to help us. And then what happened was I went to church, I was lukewarm. I think that may be an overstatement. Maybe, maybe room temperature Catholic, by definition, if I check the box. And then as Molly and I got married, we started having children, and then we took them to Catholic school, and even then getting a little warmer. Sure. So it was a progression. Then our children started to grow up and started to go away. And we said, what's important to us? It took us a little while, probably in our mid-40s, where I said, what is really important to us? What do we care about? And certainly my bride was very impactful for that. That one football player from Minnesota, he's a Catholic speaker, and I forget his name. He said he had a drug problem when he got married, and he said his wife drugged him to church, which I thought I love it. Matt something. I'll think of his name in a minute. But anyway, it's the same with me. So as Molly and I joined Legatus initially, it was transformative for us because we joined Legatus when we were 40-ish. And we said, it'll be great to have a Catholic date night. We still had a couple kids at home, but we could get away a little bit. It was on Wednesday night, and we'll go to Mass, and we'll go. And then we said, well, maybe we'll go on this trip. Okay. And we went to, and I became the president of the local chapter. I don't remember we went on the trip, but maybe it was one of the summits. But I remember going to a meeting, and they said, "Oh, Kathy wants to speak. She's one of the members of our chapter." And none of us are. I always laugh when I speak now, but none of us in our own towns, right, are prophets in our own towns.
Right.
But my friend Kathy, who I love, who's gone to heaven, but Kathy's a beautiful person, and I thought of her. I'm going to date myself with this reference.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
But Bewitched was a television show.
Bewitched, yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
And Gladys Kravitz was the next door neighbor. She was like a wacky next door neighbor.
Right, yeah.
Kathy's just pure, beautiful heart. But I said she's kind of like a friendly, kind Gladys Kravitz. I don't want her to speak at the meeting that I'm president of because it might reflect upon me as the new president. And how egotistical is that? Well, Kathy got up to tell the story of her miraculous healing at Medjugorje.
Oh, wow.
She was cured of cancer. And she had a terminal blood cancer, and she had been leading trips there for 20 years. She was an amazing person and took thousands of people, to Medjugorje. And she was there on Apparition Hill. She had gone so much, she got to kind of go in the inner circle, and it didn't matter where you were, but she was in the inner circle, and she heard Our Lady say in her heart, "Kathy, my son has cured you, come home."
Wow. So
she went to Hillman Cancer Center. So this isn't like a land far, far away. This is Hillman Cancer Center on Forbes Avenue in Pittsburgh. Wow. And her oncologist said, "Your cancer's gone. And your cancer doesn't go away, and your cancer doesn't go in remission, but yours is gone." And I said, that was an eye-opening moment for me. And say, "Chris, how dumb are you to think that you're the guy who judges who comes to speak here?" And then she said to me, "Chris, I think you and Molly are called to come to Medjugorje. I think Our Lady's calling you." And she was right. And we had 2 kids left at home, so we took them with us. Okay. Went to Medjugorje, and one of our sons was abroad at that time, so we got to see him in Prague as well. And it was really like Medjugorje is such a beautiful place. Yeah. And the healings are unbelievable. What's happening there on Apparition Hill is amazing. And have you been by chance?
I have not been, but I've seen pictures.
So the statue of the risen Christ weeps. And I'm like, weeps water. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not sure that's that big a deal to me.
You're the skeptic.
Yeah, I'm a skeptic. Well, I got off the bus skeptical of the whole thing, and I was wrong.
Sure.
The minute my feet hit the ground, I said, I'm wrong about everything. Wow. Literally everything. But it was such an interesting thing to see the statue, and people were kind of dabbing it with tissues to retain the water. I said, I don't get it. And we went away, and there was a huge line. I came back a couple hours later, and it was weeping water. And I said, and I sat there. I was overwhelmed by it. I was like, it's just amazing what an impact it had. But just being there and being on Apparition Hill and being everywhere and seeing the visionaries. And one of them I remember saying, it was just so funny. I think who it was, an Vic guy, I think, but she told the story about how she was there, and she said the Blessed Mother took us to heaven and took us to hell so we could see it, and took us to heaven. Yeah. I'm like, absolutely, she did. You went from disbelief to completely. And one of the boys had lost his mother. Okay. One of the visionaries. I'm not sure it's a boy. It lost the mother, and that mother was allowed to take human form and hug the child. Wow. Yeah. So, and all that, and again, this is stuff to me. If you told me that 3 years earlier, I'd be like, "You're out of your mind." For right? Sure. But it was a beautiful trip, and it was wonderful. And we went on to Prague, and it was so interesting. I remember this vividly in Prague. I was just visiting our son who was a semester abroad, and being so filled up. And then they were saying to me, "Oh, this bridge in Prague." There was a famous war was fought there. But and the tour guide thought it was an interesting insight to say, and this bridge has more suicides than any other bridge in Europe. Oh. And like she was saying, it was built to like some sort of icon. Yeah, it was the strangest thing, like the kind of the devaluation of the human life. Wow, right? It was incredible. And a little of that, and Molly and I said, "What's important to us?" And in the middle of all that, we kind of got to know the Sisters of Life a little bit, and a little bit more, and really, they've become an incredible relationship for us over the years. But I remember thinking to myself, what matters to us? I think we realized that probably the protection of human life became extremely important to us. And we said, we're not going to be embarrassed about that. We're going to talk about it all the time. We're going to try to the limited degree we can. Maybe we can never thought we could be leaders in that, really. Yeah. But it's the good news is if you're anxious to start something, it's not hard to get deeply involved quickly, Yeah. And people are wonderful. So I'm hearing a lot in this, and this is beautiful. No, and I think that there is the abundance of God is what I'm feeling called to, is the abundance of God when you say yes, right? Yes. So you had experienced abundance in a secular sense, and I actually want to go back to that. Before we talk about investing, which I really want to talk about Aquinas Wealth Advisors and all your great work there. Okay, so you had 5 kids, yes, and generally speaking,
the world would say, first off, that's too many. But if you have 5 kids, there's no way you can be successful in business, or you have to sacrifice your family to be successful in business. How do you respond to that? Or how did you experience that?
Well, for me, I was never a guy I'm not a good guy. Okay. By coincidence, I have 5 black belts in martial arts, which is a weird thing. Okay? And I always said, if I didn't have 5 kids and 5 black belts in various martial arts, people wouldn't think I'm a man. I don't really like to golf that much. I don't like to smoke cigars. I don't, people with brown liquor, it kind of scares me. It makes me nauseous, So I don't have like a lot of these kind of normal. I don't know if it's because my dad wasn't there.
Certain masculine traits.
I didn't have tremendous athletic stuff at all.
Yeah.
I didn't have tremendous academic skill at all. So I was very average in everything that I had done. Right. And I mean, perhaps I developed a quick tongue as a result of that. But I think what was interesting was just that. I think what happened to us is we were trying to figure it out. And I realized the only thing that was important to me is I love my wife, right? And I was like, I get it. She's spectacular. So I remember the day, and I tell the story all the time. I remember vividly, it was a long time ago. I think it was 1984, and we were staying on the Dorman Towers at Duquesne University. And I remember vividly saying to her, I was ready. I was like, let's go. And I was a junior in college, and she was a sophomore in college. I remember saying, Molly, I love you. And she said, thank you. And I said, that wasn't the answer I wanted. So I've been chasing her ever since. I've always known that I've always wanted to be, it's very important to me that she and I be very close. Well, we got so busy at the beginning and I was not paying attention. I remember saying to her 2, 3, 4 years of our marriage, I said, Mom, we have a great relationship because we had always had a great fellowship. And she said, I don't know if we have any relationship at all.
Wow.
Yes. Oh, wow. And this is the kindest person in the world saying this to you. So this is like the most devastating thing. Someone can punch you right in the middle of the face and say, I don't know if we have any relationship at all. I said, okay, the only thing I know is nothing else matters except her and God Almighty. So I said, I'm going to just change my whole approach to everything. And I was a worker. I'm a high energy person.
Yeah.
So I was a worker, but I found that I made the decision. It wasn't a hard decision. It was an easy decision. I said, the only thing I'm ever going to do is I'm going to either be working and advancing the ball for the family, or I'm going to be home. Okay. Those are the only 2 places I'll be. Wow. So I'm not a golfer. She wants me out of the house now because we have too much time together. So I have a dog and I take long walks and I do jujitsu still and all that stuff. But anyway, but that was a real experience. And the other thing I decided to, it shocked me when I would talk to my friends. I'd say, how often a day do you? And people to this day, if they say to me, I'm having trouble. And people say that to us as men of faith. They probably say it to you. Help me. I'm having trouble with my family. Mm-hmm. And they say, okay, first of all, nothing else matters. So it doesn't matter. And that's the only thing that matters. So how often do you speak to your wife a day? I always say that question. And people say, geez, well, I guess, I see her in the morning sometimes, but she's taking the kids. And it's maybe I'll talk to her when I get home and we'll put some kids to bed. Maybe I'll talk to her when I'm home twice a day. Wow. And I'm like, you got to completely turn that on its head. Mm-hmm. The first solution is, I said, when you find something interesting, funny, insightful, who do you speak to about that? Yeah. Who do you communicate that to? Well, I don't know. I talked to the guy at the office, or I talked to my contemporary or my assistant or whoever the heck it is. I said, the first thing you have to do is you have to change the way you communicate with the world. Everything is seen through the lens of, or through the funnel of it's our funnel.
Yeah,
we're together with the two of us are together. So if I know something that's funny, it's funny. Yeah, because they need joy too, right?
Amen. Yeah.
The other thing, I'm sorry, I can keep going. I'm sorry.
I like this.
So the other thing I decided to do is if I go to meetings, I had to go to conference. I was financial planning, so it was more localized, but there was conferences I had to go to occasionally. And I found the conference would start on Saturday, or let's say it started on Monday. People would go on Sunday. Yeah. And it would end on Wednesday. They'd leave on Thursday or Wednesday night. And I said, I used to make a challenge to myself. How short a time can I stay at a conference? Yes. I would say, now it's different if you're working for somebody else, but generally you can still do the same thing. You can generally say, even if you're working for somebody else or you're on your way up, you could say, the conference starts on Monday. There's a flight that gets in at 5 o'clock in the morning. It leaves 5 o'clock in the morning Monday. I'll get there at 8. I'll be there at 8:30 in the morning on Monday. Wow. I won't be there Sunday night. Now I won't be there for dinner Sunday night because nothing's going to happen at that dinner. Right. What's going to happen there? And the other thing I'm going to do is on the other end, I'm going to say, what's happening Wednesday morning? Well, if they're recording all the sessions, I can get the sessions when I get
There you go. Yeah.
And I think one time I had a funny one. I went to Phoenix and I flew out to Phoenix. And we had a lot going on at home. We still had 5 kids at home. And I got there and I got to the Phoenician, the big hotel, and I got my kit I got my golf, whatever, the shirt. And I was in the room and I went to the cabana and I saw the people I want to see. And I had been there for about 2.5 hours. I got kind of all this stuff, and the meeting wasn't really starting. It was a dinner that night, and I said, "This is great. I got all my stuff now. All the things are going to be recorded, so I can get those. I can pull those down from the web." And I went back to the airport.
Okay.
And I flew back with the same crew that flew out. And I sat in the same seat. It was hilarious. So the surgeon said, "What's going on?" Like, "Hi." And I said, "Oh, I got all my stuff. And they energized me. And I was looking for energy. I got some energy talking to some other folks in our industry because that's important. But I was probably in Phoenix for about 5 hours.
Okay.
And I got home, and my wife's like, "You're out of your mind." But at the same time, I'm sure she was like, well, I appreciate that this is the...
That's right. It's that intentionality that goes. And the more times you do that, and the more times that we sacrifice for our wife and sacrifice for our children, the more success they'll have in life, right? Because that relationship and that bond is being built and solidified. And they're realizing not only... So we talk about this a lot on the show, that you are the image of the Father that they cannot see. You're the voice of the Father they cannot hear. You're the heart of the Father that they cannot experience. And that's our call as men. And so the more that we do that, and the more that we're intentional about that, including maybe missing out on an open bar night at an event because you're able to get home with them, just goes so far. So I'm grateful. I want to talk about investing. I want to talk about what, please, no, before we get there.
I got one more that I talk to people, because the people on this listening to the show are 25 to 50 and all over the place.
That's right.
That's right. I would say the number one thing is I would tell everybody, I tell people that marry my daughters and my sons that got to marry women, anybody that spends any time in a men's grill is a fool.
Yeah.
If your grandfather and your wife want you out of the house, that's totally different. If you're 50, but I think these people, I go in these places, I think, what are you guys doing here?
So true.
If you're a golf guy, which I'm not, I play a little bit, but I don't enjoy it. That's okay. Tee off at 7:30 in the morning, play 9 holes, be done at 9:30, and pick up some donuts on the way home and be in the house by 9:45.
Yeah.
And the guys that have this need for fellowship beyond that, I try to make it, every time I'm doing that, I'm not doing my job as a father, as a leader, as a man. Yeah. What do men do? Men love their wives, men love their children, and men have a tendency, I think, to stick to a code of ethics and behavior that's consistent with someone who at all times, if anyone says to me, and I think it's a simple rule of thumb, don't tell your wife. I said, then don't tell me.
Yeah, amen.
Ever,
I like that a lot.
Right. Don't ever tell me. That's how dare you?
That's right.
How dare you try to drive that wedge between me and my bride?
Wow. Oh, that's so good.
So we can talk about it now.
No, I think that's so great. And this is what's so important, I think, because you have been successful. You have, how many, 2 companies that you own?
2 companies, a normal traditional wealth management firm, MFA Wealth, which has done well, it's successful. And we started Aquinas Wealth Advisors about 5 years ago because the need for faith-aligned investing is extremely important. And we're actually building a whole ecosystem with Aquinas. We're going to try to have where Catholic people can have their entire financial lives. And, it's critical because what's happened is for the industry's lied to us and they have not told us we're investing in things. What we're doing as individuals, young people, old people, in organizations, we're saving money, which we have to be good stewards of our gifts.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to be.
Yeah, there are talents that have been given. Mm-hmm.
Amen. So we have to be good stewards of that because ultimately it's going to advance the kingdom if done correctly. And we're taking those monies and doing things. There has become this kind of really anti-Catholic vitriol, this anti-Catholic wave that has quietly overtaken the investment world. It started in the liberal colleges. I always said, I said it started in the teachers' lounge at Middlebury 20 years ago, and now it's in the boardrooms. These emboldened CEOs, CFOs, CCOs think that we care about their opinion. I don't care about their opinion.
No.
Make profits, treat your employees fairly, and then give those profits back to the shareholders in the form of dividends. That's the way our country works, and they will decide what to support. If a CEO wants to talk about some important need of what they would call reproductive rights, I think we'd probably call murder, then if they want to support that with their $7 million salary, they can. But the hubris to take monies from the corporation, put them in a foundation, and then give them away to these organizations. We found hundreds and hundreds of organizations, individuals, unknowingly, because the industry doesn't tell us, saying, we found an organization a few weeks ago that was paying for 350 abortions a year.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So no, they'll take a step back here. So yeah, I'm a young man. I'm 30 years old, newly married, and I am looking at getting into investing. Yes. And I think that everyone is the same. Like, okay, Shopify is doing well. The Magnificent Seven. I'm just going to go with them, right? Sure. Because that's what everybody did. The blue chips. I'm going to just go that. I'm going to be good. How would you respond to that? But I would actually even ask you to take it a step back further, because the story of how we got to where we're at is important in understanding where we're putting our money.
Yes.
And because it's not just about making profit, right? It's also what we are allowing to happen with our budget. Like, is that extra 1% worth the potential murder of babies? And so you're the experienced genius in this. And so I'd love for you to kind of set that straight.
I got a little bit of good news. It doesn't even cost us 1%. We always thought that. It costs us 1%. When we started doing this, we said, you know what? I'm so a little long in the tooth. And many of my there's people at our beautiful conference and other that say it's going to cost me 2%, and it doesn't matter what it costs me. I cannot do this.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. But what the good news is, it doesn't cost 2%. We have a secular company. We have Aquinas, which is our faith-based company. It's shocking how competitive the returns have been.
Oh, terrific.
Because technology is bad in so many ways. We've developed technology, though, called a faith and finance score, where anybody, they have no obligation. They can go in there and link their Robinhood account, pull it in, and get their faith and finance score.
Oh, it doesn't cost anything.
Nothing.
All right, we'll put that link in the show notes. Yeah, thank you.
It's something they should do.
That's right.
Because at the very least, there's advisors that are intentionally giving bad information. But there's also a lot of advisors who just don't know. Because some of these Wall Street firms have gotten so off kilter.
Sure.
They were late to the woke game, but they're deep in it now.
Okay.
So they're into it, and there's funding things that you can't believe, particularly around pornography. I mean, companies 30 years ago would have been humiliated to be in pornography. Yeah, they would. It's a word of the part. Now I remember reading one of these putrid, companies was doing content creation. I remember reading it. And the CEO of the company said, we have a safe environment where content creation, where our creators can use their expression to make high profits for this publicly traded company. And I'm reading this thing thinking, could you imagine a CEO 20 years ago say, hey, guess what, honey? I sent a letter to, and my children, going back to what I said earlier, I sent a letter to all the shareholders telling them that we have a pornography, what leads to the degradation of men, of women, of humanity, the worth of the value of this individual, right? Yeah. It's unbelievable. So the great news is technology, with all its bad stuff, has allowed us to develop our tools, the faith and finance tools, and also there's even some off-the-shelf tools that exist where people can see what they're supporting and empowered to go back to their advisors and say, I can't tolerate this any longer. Wow.
We'll
change our goals are radically transform the world. And we're going to say, we'll send letters to the company saying we had to sell that stock. They don't send this. They don't sell. Target didn't sell women's bathing suits because they thought they'd sell a lot of women bathing suits.
Right.
They were positioning themselves to get a high enough what's called CEI score.
Okay.
A CEI score, because if you recall, just about 2.5 years ago, Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock said, if you don't subscribe to our policies around gender ideology and reproductive rights, even if your company's profitable, you'll lose your job as Mr. CEO.
Wow.
Because we control so much of the indexes. Well, the good news is now, so they're not ideologues. Generally, they're not ideologues. They're already starting to say, remember how Disney said, we're not going to say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, because we don't offend anybody. Right. Well, all this stuff, they're dialing it back, but it's still baked in there, particularly around pornography, particularly around abortion. Those are two big, and as people of faith, there's 50% of the country, at the least, that says this is wrong. I don't want to support this. And how dare they take our money and support these things with it? How dare they take the money of dioceses, institutions, and young individuals, the guys, and even the guys with the young guy with the Robinhood account? We can avoid it for him too.
Well, what do these the VC firms, what do they gain by investing in pornography? Like, what is their... It's
profitable as can be. That's the main thing, unfortunately.
It's just profitable for them.
Very profitable. I don't think there's a dark... Well, I should say that. I believe that certainly the devil is real. The devil's at play here.
Yeah.
And the darkness, I've never, to this day, as I said, I just had a big birthday. I never heard anybody who said, 50 years, I'm 50 years old, and boy, am I proud of my career in pornography. Was it wonderful, right? These people are victims.
Yes, absolutely.
These people are
destroyed.
Destroyed.
Yeah, I completely agree. So how does this, if somebody is talk to me about ESGs and where those are maybe misplaced or misguided.
That's the word I was just going to use.
Oh, terrific.
It's born in compassion. It's misguided compassion. About a year and a half ago, I was in a debate in New York City, and it was the ESG investing versus faith-based investing.
Can we talk? ESG stands for environment.
Yeah, social and governance.
Okay.
So basically, the idea is be fair to everybody, which is a great ideal. But and these companies, it became a cottage industry. Companies were producing an annual report every year and a separate ESG report every year.
Okay.
It became an industry. People were getting certifications. They were making certifications up, and you got certified. Then you went to a conference, and it became its own self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
The great news is corporations are smart enough now to start dialing all that back.
Okay.
They're dialing the lunacy back. But this man was a good guy, but he's right out of central casting. He said, it's because of my Catholic faith I got involved in ESG investing. I said, that's wonderful, but you're really wrong.
Okay.
And let me help you understand that, because,
help us
because these
understand
companies are, I talked about, for example, the CEI index that says,
Yes.
The woman who ran this organization, the CEI index, had run Planned Parenthood. They were so detached from faith, it was unbelievable. There was a strong anti-Christian, anti-Catholic vitriol that was being kind of promoted through this whole thing, and these guys were blind to it. Partly is because Wall Street is extraordinarily arrogant. I hate to be so negative,
Yeah, sure.
but they're not used to being challenged. That's a more fair way to say it. And as someone had stood up, and he was so frustrated, he was so confused by this, and he stood up and he went over to the podium because he was hosting the event, but he wasn't in the debate. No. And he stood up and he got up there and he said, "Gosh, I probably shouldn't have stood up." But he said, "We've worked with activist investors before." I said, I know you're just making this comment, but activist investors used to be people who would buy companies and say, we no longer should be in the water business or the computer business. Let's sell that off.
Okay.
That was an activist. He said, that's no longer a viable business. Activist investors weren't saying, unless you support the rights to murder children in the womb, or unless you support rights that are contrary to Catholic values around traditional families, then we're going to run you out of business. Now, as I said, the environment has cooled for that lately, which is wonderful. And you saw some real pushback on that with Target and Bud Light and others.
Yeah, Bud Light, yeah.
But anyway, and Disney, and there were some the corporations for the first time. And that's the great news. We as people of faith used to say, just be quiet. Don't say anything. It'll go away. It won't get worse. It won't get worse. But then for us to say, think about that. The idea of pronouns on its face is absurd.
Of course. Yeah.
So you're like, why? And what I've started to do, I've started doing it for years. I'll ask people, particularly, I'll say, why? So why do you have? I think it's a great thing to say. I'm sorry. Why does it say? Why do you choose to put those pronouns on your email? And people are shocked because no one ever asked them that. And they'll say, well, I didn't want to offend anybody. So, well, don't you think you're offending at least
me?
Yeah, and you're offending at least half the world. If you don't have pronouns, really no one's offended.
Yes,
no one's offended if you don't have pronouns. No. But if you have pronouns, you're offending half the folks. Yeah. Now, I think pronouns is going to go away. I think it's already on its way out. I like to see the statistics on it, but it just shows you the lunacy of how we got caught in this kind of downwards, this race to the bottom of absurdity. The great news is technology is going to allow so Aquinas, we're helping
please,
people.
Let's talk Aquinas.
We're helping people, individuals and institutions, understand what their investments are supporting. And a lot of the people that are 30, 35, 40, now they've been at 3 or 4 or 5 different jobs. And they have 5 that floated out there with 5 different 401k plans. You add it up, it's $70, $80, $100, $200,000, many times more than that. And they haven't invested, and they think they're people of good faith. They're many times daily communicators, the best they can with a young family. And we say, gosh, they run the score and say, 42% of my money is supporting things that I'm completely contrary to. Schwab had just done a big study recently, and the study was very clear. 75% of all the people they polled said, my values should be reflected in my investments. That's important to me. That's good news.
Yeah.
And the other good news is that people are listening.
That's
people
right.
are listening.
So with Aquinas Wealth Advisors, talk to me. I know there's AI involved. Yes. I know that you're able to uncover things that we in a Google search wouldn't be able to do. Yes. But it's more than just that. I want to hear exactly how you're helping individuals basically be smart, prudent, good stewards of their money.
Yeah, because planning is a very important thing. No matter if you're completely secularized or deeply in your faith, planning is very important. And we found a lot of people just don't have the initiative. Sometimes people put off difficult things, right? Say, I don't want to go through a planning process. So the great thing is, folks, we wrote the book, faithful finances.
Yes.
And the whole idea was to say to people, how do I have a Catholic aligned financial life? And the book's been very successful. Our friends at Sophia Press published it. It's wonderful. So it's great to talk about it. But we said, first thing we asked ourselves, why aren't people having number one, a financial plan?
Yes.
Number two, a Catholic financial plan. Well, they don't have a financial plan because they're overwhelmed and nervous and afraid.
Sure. Yeah. This is the life of many a family.
Absolutely. And why do they don't have a Catholic financial plan? Because that makes them even more overwhelmed. And so
Exactly.
such as more of the same. And we said, how can we break it down and put it in 6 steps over a 180-day process to slowly, first of all, talk about it. And it's a pretty good process.
Yeah.
Write a family mission statement.
Oh,
what
terrific.
do we care about? Who are we as a family? What a great leadership role for a young father to sit down and say,
Amen.
Let's do this. Let's write that. What was more indicative of a Catholic gentleman to say to his bride, can we write this family mission statement together and have our children there? They're 6 years old.
Amen.
Doesn't matter. What's important to you? And this is what's important to mom and I. Right?
Yeah.
Number two, and then we started about budgeting. Where are we spending our money? And so often we're saying, how much money are we giving to things that are contrary to our values? And it's a very important thing. That's a great process to go through because we have a tendency to acquire. We have a tendency to have a lot of stuff come in and nothing fall off the list.
Yep.
It's a very good exercise to go through. Then we talk a lot about, okay, what are our goals? And that's a great thing about technology. We can very specifically, and there's online resources that are free. There's in Aquinas, we certainly help people build a plan. Well, gosh, we have 4 children or 6 children or 9 children, whatever the number is. Somebody today was telling me they were 1 of 14, which is beautiful, right?
That's beautiful, yeah.
How do we, and I always think about that when people are on mission, when they're missionaries, and they say, well, my wife's at home, we have 6 children, and they pay me $51,000 a year. How do I do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's about making choices and planning for sure. But part of that process, and certainly oftentimes more is better in terms of money, but it's about discipline and planning. And that 6-step process. And we go through from budgeting, saving, and a lot of it's easy. Where do we work? Let's start with our retirement account. Let's do that first. Secondly, if there's any extra money, let's do an education fund. Before we do that, we want to have an emergency fund set aside. Let's not be reckless with our spending.
Men, it is the month of May, which is also the month of Mary inside of the church. And as such, for all new Catholic Gentleman Plus annual subscriptions, I'm able to offer you this incredible Catholic Gentleman Rosary. This is a rosary that is designed by Jonathan Conrad and his team over at Catholic Woodworker just for the Catholic Gentleman. It has St. Joseph the Worker on one side. It has the 3 hearts of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph on the other side. It has the pardon crucifix. It is incredibly strong, very masculine. I love it. Put 9 months into it. You also get all of the great content that we have inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. There are 27 sessions exclusively for men, going to the heart of what it means to be a man today. We break it up into 3 main categories. That's self-mastery. That's all the struggles that we're dealing with. Relationships, how to be a better husband, father, son, friend. We also go into our spiritual life with things such as fasting, prayer and work, our Blessed Mother, and many others. We have guest experts like Father Donald Calloway, Father Ambrose Christ, Devin Shad, Jason Craig, incredible men that are all just in the mission to help you and to help men grow in masculinity and grow in holiness in 2025 and beyond. We've got some great sessions coming out. We've got some mini courses coming out. So if you head over to CatholicGentlemanPlus.com, it is the best way to support the Catholic Gentleman. You're going to get that Saint Quote book. You're going to get this incredible rosary, and you're going to get exclusive access to everything inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. Just thinking about it, we also give you daily saint quotes directly to your phone in inbox or SMS. We give wallpapers to remember what prayers we're doing. We give ebooks inside. There is so much going on inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. Again, best way to support us. Please head over to CatholicGentlemanPlus.com. Pick yours up today. Keep us in your prayers. You are in ours. God bless. Yeah, this is so excellent. And so that you're helping people through that. Now, there is something that I want to go down because you kind of alluded to it. And this idea of being good stewards of our money means being generous with our money. And I want to talk about generosity because I know so there's 2 things going through my head. And one of them is having a good money mindset, right? It's like that, how to use money. It's neither evil or it's neither good, right? It can be used for both and we've got to get that right. And I do think that because of how so many of us were raised, there is this sense of, if I'm not just saving, then I'm somehow doing something wrong. Or you get the other attitude of like, out of sight, out of mind, as long as I don't look at it, and that's frivolous and foolish, and they're racking up credit card debts. And so those are extremes. But I'd love to talk to you first about how to correct a false money mindset of basically adding morality like directly associated with money, like it's either good or bad, evil or good. And then I'd love to talk about generosity. And when we get to generosity, the heart of it is, I hear a lot of men say, I'll be generous when. Sure. Like when I hit this fictitious number. And so I'd love to just hear you talk first about just kind of framing money rightly within our lives.
Sure. It's a tool. It's not good or evil, but it is a responsibility, right?
Yes.
It's a responsibility to use all of our gifts wisely, right? And we do it with the grace of God, all of us, of course. So that's very, very important that we first say, this is a gift from God. I have a responsibility to be prudent with it, to accumulate some of it, to make sure I take care of the people who I love.
Yeah.
And then ultimately dispose of it in the proper way. And all the way along the line, be giving back. That's what I think is so wonderful about this particular conference. We have so many business people that have really done, incredible things. There's people from all facets, right? But they've done incredible things. Had enormous exits, as we say.
Okay.
And I admire those people that have done things where they've given it away. And I think one of my friends was his foundation. He had an exit at 40. It was a big exit. And he probably put $50 million into a foundation.
Wow.
And people said, I don't know who he is. And I said, that's strange, because I know he's been very, very generous with certain causes. And I realized that the reason is because the foundation he called like the BEG Foundation for initials of his first three kids. So no one knew who it was. Okay. And because he wanted to be humble about it, which I thought was wonderful. And I think about that, the idea that we always have to give some money away. And Molly and I, as I said, a lot of my stories of hope come from the Sisters of Life. But one I always remember is when a sister was walking to church in New York about 4 years ago, she ran across a homeless guy, and he was sitting there, and she said, "How are you?" She stopped to engage him. "How are you?" And he took out a piece of paper and said, "I'm deaf." And she wrote it. And she wrote back, "How you doing?" And they talked for a minute back and forth on his paper. Finally, she said, "I have a granola bar. Would you like that?" He said, "No." And she said, "I'm going to church. Do you want to go?" And he said, "Yes."
Okay.
So he gathered up all his stuff, he's all his worldly goods, and they were walking. They were going to St. Pat's, and as they were walking by, a woman walked by and handed him $20. Maybe it was maybe she would have done it anyway. Maybe it was because with a beautiful Sister of Life. Who knows? Handed him $20, and they went to church. And as they were sitting there, people were kind of being kind, but they a little cautious. And as he was sitting, and Sister was amazed. She told me the story as the collection basket came around. The basket, he takes $20 and puts it in the basket. Oh, so think about that. That was
widow's mite right there.
Wow. Yeah. So I think about that all the time. That was the $20 he had. He put in the basket. They took him back. They don't really take care of men, but he came back. He was able to clean up a little bit. He was able to have dinner. And as he was getting ready to leave, his sister walked away from the table. He wrote a piece of paper to somebody else. "I can't believe she loves me."
Wow.
Okay, so he wanted the human connection. He didn't want the money. And as he was leaving, think about this. As he was leaving the Sister's Life house, he said, "Here." And he wanted to give them his tent. Oh. And they said, he said, "Someone could use this." And she said, "Well, you could use this." Yeah. So think about that. The only worldly the generosity of heart, and to say this is important to me because it's cold outside and I need a place to sleep, and he's willing to give that away just because of that human connection, because of God's grace. So I think we don't have to give away our tent. Okay. Yeah. But I think we have to think more like that. And we have to think about those others that are less fortunate than us. And it starts at the beginning. It can be very, very small. Yeah. People will say, I think it's a responsibility of all Catholic men as leaders of their household to identify with their spouse. It's not we're very equal in these decision making. Say we have to give a certain amount of money away before we do anything else. Amen. The idea of saying we're gonna join this club, or we're gonna I don't know, find this hitting lessons for baseball for our 7-year-old, whatever. There's so many things out there that we're going to do. We're going to first of all support the church, because that's where we start. And financially it can be very small. It doesn't matter what it is. It has to be something, and it can't just be time, in my opinion. It has to be financial.
This is so good. And I love how you led with generosity, and I completely agree. It has to be financial. We have to lead. there's no get out of jail free. It's not like, oh, I give of my time this way. That's beautiful. And you need to do that. And we are called to give 100% of ourselves, but there has to be that financial giving, and it has to start. I like how you just said it starts with generosity. Like, we have to give first, because the heart of a man as sacrifice, if he is both thankful and he is both generous, he is going to be on the right path and leading his family. And so I really appreciate that idea of not just finding a place within the schedule to be generous, but actually starting with generosity, regardless of where you're making $50,000 a year, you're making $500,000 a year, right? The idea of setting a time of age or profit that you will all of a sudden start being generous, it never will. You never will, because you have learned to idolize and find your identity in your money and your profit, and not in the way of God and Him being your Father and what we're called to do with our money. So I love that.
Absolutely. It's just so important. I have an acquaintance who's boy, he's older than I am, and he's mad he's not Elon Musk. Matter of fact, he told me something interesting. He called me to tell me this. I thought, what a dark place he lives in.
Oh,
I'm January 12th, 1965, a long time ago. Elon Musk, not realizing it, he was January 12th, 1964. I think it was Elon Musk. And my friend said, doesn't it drive you bananas that he's worth whatever it is, $300 billion, and you're not? And I said, not at all. I mean, my wife and my children, my family, I've been blessed, and I've been fortunate in business as well, and doing all these things. I was able to start Aquinas and grow this thing, and I'm so fortunate to have I have success beyond more than I would ever expected, and it's a gift from God. And he just doesn't understand that. I said, well, I always say the same thing. If you're feeling disappointed about your life, I'm 42 years old and I haven't been senior vice president yet. These things are so temporal, right?
Yeah.
But I say, I always say the same thing. When is the last time you made a sandwich for a poor person? Every city, every listener, there's a homeless shelter. And they all want volunteers. Go down there twice and even better, take your children with you, your young children. What a better example. You're with them, they're going to be fine. And hand out sandwiches to the poor and realize what's going on. And maybe, whatever money's in your pocket, maybe that money that's in your pocket. I said this to my children, and they always make fun of me for it. They're grown now, but I say, never, ever be with a religious person and don't give them the money that's in your pocket.
Ooh, I like that.
And if somebody said, my mom, God bless her, she's with us, she was ill, and I laughed because she recovered, very ill. She recovered, and the priest was so nice. He came over to the hospital. We were in Jersey City, and he came over, and he was refusing to take any. I said, Father, you have to. And he said, no. I said, well, you have to give it to the poor. He said, no. I said, Father, when my mother wakes up, if she finds out I didn't at least buy lunch for the rectory or give money to the poor, I don't care what, it's on, you do with it what you think is best. You're giving this to you. And because, and he said, okay, you're absolutely right. You're right. It's our responsibility to help the people, the poor, the beautiful, not the Sisters of Life. I'm sorry. I always get
Sisters
it wrong.
Mary?
Yeah. The ones that are here,
Carmelites.
The Carmelites.
Yeah, the Carmelites, which is very odd because I didn't just learned about these excerpts, these ones that are allowed to leave the convent and not in the cell. Yeah, anyways, very beautiful.
Electricity.
No electricity.
No,
amazing.
I think no plumbed water. I think they have well water on a pump. The hand pump. And I said, Sister, how do you make, I said, what about smoothies? And I was joking with her. She said, we make them. We just do it by hand. And they make a smoothie by hand, which I think is amazing. But, think about that life that what they're doing. And they're the ones in the cloister, they're praying for us.
Yeah.
We absolutely, as Catholic leaders, have a responsibility to support them, whether it's, again, $5 a month. Father Aloysius Schwartz and the Sisters of Mary.
Father Al Schwartz. I love him. Venerable Al Schwartz. Yeah.
He's amazing. Have you been by chance to Chalco?
I have not, but I had Kevin Wells on my show.
Yeah, sure.
And I read the whole book, and I just was so enthralled and enamored and just in love with what he did and how he started it and what's going on down there.
Simone and I, that's been a great place for everybody. When you go, and I wouldn't go to Guadalupe without going out to World Villages of Children. Guadalupe is amazing, but it's only half the trip. Because you go out to Guadalupe, it sounds to what I'm saying is insane, because you look at the Tillman painted by the hand of God, but then you go out and you see the girls, the miracle of Chalco, and you see the just Our Lady alive.
Yes,
it's unbelievable. You cannot describe it. And you meet the Sisters of Mary, and you're just so blown away by it. And we were in a room this size, a big room, and they said, this is the banana room. The room, I can't count how many bananas are in this room. I don't know. 60,000 bananas. I might be late. And they said, this is bananas gets us through Tuesday. And it was already like a Thursday. And then we fill the room back up with bananas. And the scope and the scale of what they're doing down there. But I said, Sister Marta, who's one of the most beautiful people, I said, Sister, what does it cost for each girl? And she said, well, it's not a lot. I think it's $300 a year. Most of us can find $300 a year in our budgets. And that's what we found so interesting when we were in this financial planning process at Aquinas and with the book, Faithful Finance. We say, where are the expenses going? So most of the time, it's not an income problem. It's a budgeting problem. It's a loose spending problem, or it's a cultural problem like you were talking about earlier. The husband came from a culture of spending. Okay. The wife came from a culture of saving, or not spending anything, or not making any financial decisions. So it's that's a beauty of a marriage, right? We mature, we grow together,
and we grow together, and talk through these things.
Yeah, and our relationship gets deeper, and it's guided by the hand of God. So we have to pray about it.
Yeah,
and then we have to move forward with the plan that it may take 180 days, and then we have to start with budget in mind. But our first expenditure should be to the church.
Yeah, amen. Talk about Father Al. What a courageous man. If you want a model of masculinity, you can find it in that man who had everything, and then the order that he was with was a missionary order, but wasn't missionary. Yeah, exactly. And so he ended up moving and then living in a shed and then just working against warlords. And I mean, it's incredible. So share with us a little bit more about the Sisters of Mary and their heart and your heart for them. I'd love to just hear that because it's so amazing.
You can't believe I was telling a story earlier, Sister Margie, and these women have been incredible. I mean, they're CEOs. That's what they are. And if you see the videos of the Girlstown, you'll see, and there's boys' towns too, 3,000 kids at all these places. Yeah. And the Girlstown, you go to Mexico City, and they're so beautiful and so kind. And a young girl came up to me and she said, "How's my English?" And I'm like, "It's better than mine. It's unbelievable. You can't believe how these girls are brought out of object poverty." I saw a photograph of a tarp with 4 posts in the ground and a tarp over, and that was her home. That was the home. Dirt floor, obviously. It wasn't it was just a tarp with 4 things in the ground. No plumbing, disease, sexual abuse. You can't believe. Yeah. And we were sitting. We've been fortunate to be down at Girlstown many times. We were in Girlstown we were walking around. And I said,
"Praise God."
Yeah. How are we doing here? And Sister Marta, who's so beautiful, I said, "Sister, what's going on?" And she said, "I'll tell you. One of our sisters was struggling. Not one of the girls. One of the sisters, and." One of the girls kind of first got up and told her story, and she was coming back to school, and she was wearing a ski cap. It's hot there, very unusual, and they all wear the same uniforms that they make, of course. And she said, well, the reason I'm wearing a ski cap is because I was in an accident on the way to school, and my car was rolled over, and the driver and my good friend were killed. And here I am coming back to school, and I'm hopeful that I can, someday be a doctor to help people." And their Sister Marta, they're called mother sisters because they mother these children, right?
Yes.
So you can't, I encourage anybody, and it's not, you guys are in Texas. I said to the Beatitudes the same thing. It's 2 hours away. You got to see this because I've never seen like in my life. And the girl is so optimistic, so hopeful, so filled with the love of Our Lady, and you cannot believe it. And they're also incredibly cheat at basketball, which is a different story. There's basketball courts everywhere, so lots and lots of physical activity, lots of traveling. There's a lot of it's like the NBA, a lot of violations of the rules. And every time I go with my friends, I say, "Do not participate." When you're 35, you're thinking I can still do it. And even the guys that are 40, lots of hamstrings. I saw a broken wrist last time I was there. I said, "Don't stay in your street clothes. Do not just participate, but lightly."
Yeah, talk about there's a fear that a lot of people about going to Mexico, right? Like, maybe it's unsafe. So talk a little bit about that.
My wife and I are cowards. I said, "I don't want to go anywhere that's unsafe." But Mexico City is very safe.
Yeah.
And when you travel to Mexico City, it's a city, right? I always consider it maybe like Brooklyn or maybe like that. It's not. It's nice, but it's a second tier city. But when we go to Mexico City, we travel in a large group. We go right to the shrine of Our Lady Guadalupe, which is magnificent.
Beautiful. It is transformative.
And in that same bus, we go right out to Girlstown. We stay there on the property, and you're sitting there. I know the story I was going to tell. Sister Marta came by, and she said, "Chris," I said, "Sister, what are you doing?" She was going to bed. I said, "What's happening?" And she's so upset. She said, "Well, here's what's happening. One of our sisters had really been so frustrated with her mother. She finally told me, she loves her vocation. She's got a struggle." "What's the struggle?" "Her mother, her uncle was sexually abusing her. And her older brother was sexually abusing her, and her mother allowed it to happen, in her opinion. Then her mother passed away, So here's young sister in the order, had come to the school, and she was so mad at her mother. What do you do with this? So Sister Marta, in her beautiful wisdom as a young superior, she's probably 35 or 38 years old, she said, with your permission, I would like to take the role of your mother.
Wow.
And apologize to you for allowing this to happen. So after some prayer, Sister Marta, as her mother, apologized to her, and it was extraordinarily healing to the young sister. And I said, she was her mother, that mother, and it's beautiful. And the sisters are just so beautiful and so caring. We brought them out to the Eucharistic Congress, so we had them we were around, and they were they're the best. I mean, they're unflappable. They're shocked at how much and how often we eat. I would say that's one thing.
They are.
But in general, the Sisters of Mary all over the world are the most. I've never seen Our Lady alive. Certainly the Sisters of Life, the same thing. But I see them and I think to myself, you go there and think to you, what $500 a year can change the world?
Yeah.
And in most people's budgets, we can. And
Absolutely.
one of these kids comes out of this thing, and what Father Al built there is incredible, and what the people that supported it is an incredible place.
So beautiful. Well, for my last question, our last conversation, I loved you have a way of phrasing things, and you mentioned that as a church, we must be, and it's an evangelical missionary church, we must be more sales-oriented and less compliant. And I want you to talk again, for my edification, for our listeners' edification, about what you mean by that, sales versus compliance. And let me just start before we dive in, that as you gave this wonderful talk, and then this gentleman corrected you, you were so great about looking at him and saying, we've got somebody in compliance here. Like, it's just way over his head.
It's so interesting. It's so funny. I think it's so interesting because we started something at Pittsburgh, and that's why I love Eustace Mead so much. Who's here too. Yeah. Eustace, I didn't realize that we were, he has a group that meets 80 guys a week on Fridays in New York, in Philadelphia and New Jersey. And he said, well, could you join ours? I said, I can't, because unrelated to him completely, we started one in Pittsburgh that I called Bromentum. So we have about 40, 50 guys a year. And I would suggest all the listeners, especially if they're 35, 25, 40, to go to find the cool priest in their city.
Yeah.
There's one, great homilist.
For sure.
And say, when do you say morning mass? And he's going to say, I say it at 7 a.m. on Fridays, 7 a.m. on Thursdays. Say, okay, I'm going to get a group of guys to come here. If it's okay with you, we're going to come to Mass, and then we're going to go downstairs and have a coffee and just kick it around. If you can join us, join us. If you can't join us, don't. Well, those priests love the fellowship too.
I'm sure.
Right? So I called it Broman intentionally to make it a little more casual, more relaxed. And we start with a kind of banter. But what I found is so many men are kind of reticent to engage in a Bible study, or to reticent to engage in a deep conversation. First of all, they don't want to be embarrassed, because some people weaponize our faith, and they want to say, I know more than you know.
That's right.
Therefore, I'm better than you. Therefore, I'm closer to heaven, which is the opposite of what's true, right? True. So I always say to people, let's just go in here and kick it around. And it's pretty simple. He died for our sins.
Amen.
And it's the body and blood of Christ. That's the most important thing. The Eucharist is this, the summit of why we're here, right? So that's it. So in Bromentum, we do is kick this around. There's some great men in there, and we start. Honestly, it sounds horrible. We start by kind of a little insulting and a little funny, goofing around. But then there's all these things that my son is, come home and said this, or my wife has said this, or it gets very deep and very, very, very important. And we have some great priests there that come and join us, which is wonderful. So I'd encourage everybody to start that. Excellent. So I started that about 9 years ago. We have about 50 guys that show up most Fridays and just come down, and new guys, old guys. Some guys just have never been there before and say, I think, my wife's leaving me, or I'm wrong about this, or I had somebody talk about making a horrible mistake in their personal life with a coworker. And what do they do with this? I said, guys, what would you do in a situation like this? I remember saying, guys, I told him he has to go to confession, and I thought he had to speak to his wife. And I know a lot of guys were like, I don't know. They were so uncomfortable with even thinking the question. Yeah. I said, but as me as men, this is hypothetical to you. What should we have to think about these things, right? And anyway, so I think the Bromentum thing is just an unbelievable thing. So the thing that makes me laugh about compliance is, I'll give you a couple examples that make me laugh. I was saying to somebody, I was telling a sister life story. This is why our witness is so important. Okay. Be in sales. Think about the sister's life. This one I love. And as I said, so much of my material came from them. And the one I love so much is a woman in New York. I met her. She had an abortion. So she deeply regretted it. She got pregnant, and her boyfriend said, have an abortion or get out, which happens to them. She went and had the abortion. She deeply and immediately regretted it. She understood what she had done. She was overwhelmed with sadness. 3 years later, she was in the same situation. She got pregnant again. Boyfriend with the exact same response. And she knew there's no way I would have an abortion. No way. So she said, what do I do? I still don't have another job. I'm still relying upon this person, even though he's obviously not the right person. And we see this a lot at Mary's Place in Pittsburgh, too. Sure. And she said, what do I do? She said, wait a second. I remember when I had my abortion, there was a woman across the street praying the rosary. Did I mention this to you before?
No.
There was a woman across the street praying the rosary. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She didn't make eye contact with me, but I saw her. I believe she's supposed to help me.
Wow.
So she goes back in her schedule, says, that was a Tuesday 3 years ago. And it was 9:30 in the morning. So the next Tuesday came, 9:30 in the morning. She went there, and the woman was across the street praying the rosary. And she went over to her and said, you don't know me, but you were praying the rosary here. And I know God put you here to help me. She said, absolutely. She put her in a cab. They went up to probably an Uber, went up to the sister's life. That baby was born. It came into the church. The woman came into the church, and she got a new relationship to live. We have no idea the impact of our witness, what it does. It's overwhelming. Our witness is the most important thing. So I tell those kind of stories, and people say things that are just I remember saying to somebody, boy, I loved, we were talking about the Eucharist, and I said something like, I have to think about it for a second. I said, I feel so badly for my Protestant friends that don't have the Eucharist, don't have Our Lady.
Yeah. They
don't have our Eucharist. And one guy said, but I don't think you understand. The only reason you could, and we weren't talking about Eucharist in the hand. Yeah. We weren't talking about Eucharist in the hand. He said, but the only reason you can, half the people are wrong, or whatever it is, 80% of the people are, because they take the Eucharist in the hand. There was some ruling that I don't know about. I remember it was like something in Belgium that some country was allowed to take the Eucharist in the hand, and it's wrong to do it. The only reason we can do it is because of this particular ruling by a pope 20 years ago, and it's malformed the decision. And I said, well, as far as I know, the bishop of our and the pope of our church currently have both said it's okay to take it in the hand. I've been trying to take it on the tongue, but it's okay with me. I don't want to get an argument about the minutia of something that's going to take away from the joy. Some people are so incapable of having joy. And I say to people all the time when they're in compliance, I'll say, you can only say that if you say two positive things. So if you're going to give me a negative, you got to give me two positive. And it's so hard for them to say two positives. They can't do it. Think of and then I always ask the question to the compliance officers, what gives you joy? What fills you up? What gives you joy? And I think it's just such a funny thing when people come into you and they'll say things that you can't believe. They'll say, somebody said it to me the other day. We were doing that beautiful Eucharistic procession around Stone Harbor. I said, where are you in your brain when walking around the streets makes you so proud and happy and proud to be Catholic? And somebody whispered to me, they said, well, there'd be more people here 20 years ago. And I said, first of all, how do you quantify that? Number one. Number two, there's a very big crowd there. And all the people I saw coming out of the restaurants praying, I take all that. So what happened 20 years ago is immaterial. To try to reduce it. And some of that is just born out of insecurity.
Yeah.
We don't really believe it's true. We want to have a scale. And we also have power in knowledge. We have power in knowledge. And a compliance story that I thought was so funny, I wrote a thank you note to somebody years ago. They sent me something. Someone made a pie, brought it to our office, like it was Mayberry, and they would give us a pie. And I wrote them a thank you note. Thank you so much on I think it was a MFA Wealth little thank you note.
Yeah.
I had a person come to our office and say, do you have all your correspondence? I said, I think the only thing I don't have is we put somebody a handwritten thank you note. Can I see the thank you cards? And he turned it over. He said, there's no disclosures on here. In the investment business, there's no disclosures. I said, we were talking about an apple pie. We weren't talking about investments. This is a hand note about thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for this day. Thank you for, taking a ride with my children. The compliance mindset is important. Rules are important. However, we have enough people enforcing the rules. There's a conference which makes me very sad. It's a conference that is in our part of the country, and these people get together, and they fundamentally believe that I can't remember the date. They say that there wasn't a valid pope since.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever that expression is, it's dumb. Okay. Yeah. So if whatever that, if you're going to say since Leo, I'd say, okay, I guess that makes, since everybody after him isn't valid, that's true. Yeah. But if we believe the Holy Spirit helps pick the pope, we have to, this is our church. And I said, there was a pope that it wasn't in my lifetime. And I said, well, if that's the case, then there is no valid priest.
That's right.
The church is over. It doesn't matter. And I think so many times people get so caught up in this kind of this cycle of negativity and they want to almost, and you see it in relationships, people that are damaged, they may want to blow up a relationship. Oh, I'm not worthy of a good relationship, therefore I'm doing my power to blow it up before we get too far. Maybe that's what the compliance people are doing. And I think there's so many beautiful. I think about the sisters of life that lead with joy all the time. All the time. Mm-hmm. How are you so joyful? That's a question I ask people all the time. Why are you so joyful? How are you so joyful? And we all have our crosses. And one of my dear friends lost his son on Father's Day a few years ago during the peak of COVID. It was terribly sad. And my friend talked about even that tragedy he was this prayer that he reads. He talks about this was still God's will. And he can't question God's will, and it's his cross. And because it's from God's hand, there's nothing he would do to ask for it to be taken away.
Wow. Yeah.
I would like to tell you one other one, if I could, quickly, that I love. I think about joy. And who said that yesterday? Peter said that. Peter said we have to have our story of joy on the tip of our tongues. So all of us have to say, why am I Catholic? Then I say, well, why are we here? Help me understand that. Do you think Christ lived? Do you think a human being, a man, a person named Christ lived? Yes. Everyone said, do you think he was crucified? There's historical evidence to support that. Yeah. Okay, yes. Do you think he rose from the dead? Most people will say yes. They'll say, then we have to listen to what he said. Yes. So that's a pretty easy goal. There's 4 questions, and most people are like, okay, you're right. So the rest, it's malarkey. It's all dumb stuff. Sister Honest Day came to Pittsburgh, which is so beautiful. Yeah. I know we got her. Yeah. So she's a buddy. She's great. And someone said, can you bring the local hospital, the abortion hospital, where all of our kids were born? Wanted to have a talk about the Catholic Church and other churches' feelings on abortion. And I said, well, I could give it to this great priest, but you're going to do better than I can. He said, yes, I would do better than you, but I'd like you to ask one of the sisters' life to come to town. They sent Sister Honest Day. She stood up and she gave a beautiful talk and a witness and implored them. She said, well, we're sitting here. They're dismembering babies in this hospital, and we have to stop this. I'm begging you from the bottom of my heart. Then she told some really beautiful stories. And as she was closing, she said, we know this Hobie guy, and he was in New England, and he was doing his practice, his wife was home praying the rosary, and he was at the hospital murdering babies, thinking he was helping women, because he was a secular humanist, I believe is the term.
Yeah, secular humanist, that's right.
It's a fabulous term. So as he was there, he came out, and the woman, after he completed an abortion, the person picking up the patient said, Doctor, when can I pick them up? 20 minutes or a half an hour. Doctor, will she be okay? Yes. And then she said, but doctor, I have one more question. He wanted to get back in the room. And she said, what is the question? And she said, doctor, was the baby alive? And I remember she said that. I think of it now. It stunned me. Yeah. I never heard that before. Well, he had never heard that before. He was stunned, the doctor. And he thought for a minute. He said, of course the baby was alive. Of course. So by answering this woman's question, I'm either going to be a liar or a murderer. Those are the only 2 options. Yeah. At that moment, the Holy Spirit came into me in a radical transformation, came home to his wife who was praying the rosary and said, you were right about everything. I was wrong about everything. He converted the Catholic Church, delivered 3,000 babies for free. Wow. Was on Planned Parenthood's most hated list. They were driving around New England dropping off diapers and cribs and adopting, fostering babies as they did. And over the time, they had 5 more children. And 2 of them became Sisters of Life, and it was Sister Honest Day and her sister.
Praise be to God.
And you think about that, had he not let the Holy Spirit come to his heart at that moment, none of that would ever happen. Yeah. So that's our role. That's
Chris, that's amazing. Well, what's your last thoughts to men listening to live a better life, to live a more full life, and to be good stewards of their money wherever your heart is?
First of all, I'd say don't take it too seriously. Don't be so hyper worried about your career, because it'll all work out. Yeah. That job, if it's not the right job, it'll go away. And I think that's very important. And secondly, if we've done things that we're embarrassed about, make that list and say, what do I do that I'm not proud of? And make it every couple of months, make it every 60 days. Yeah. And have less things on the list. But something can't carry over. If you haven't done it in 60 days, it can come off the list. Okay. So that list gets shorter over time. And then I'd say go have a great relationship with the young priest. Start that bromentum group. Hang around guys that listen to the Catholic gentleman. Mm. Hang around guys that live this kind of life or aspiring to it.
Yeah.
And it's okay not to be, nobody's perfect. You don't have to be,
no
you know, but I think if we start walking that path, I wish I'd done it sooner.
Yeah.
And now I'm here. I know these guys like Eustace, and I know these guys, you know, Ward this morning, his story about success, and all of it is centered around the Eucharist.
That's
success, right? Ward Fitzgerald. I look at him and think to myself, he's probably the most successful real estate entrepreneur in the country, or at least one of them. Wow. And he's here in Stone Harbor, New Jersey, talking about, you know, his and his wife's, you know, devotions to Our Lady in the Eucharist. And I think if we start talking that way,
yes,
you're an incredible example. A lot of guys are embarrassed to talk that way. I'd say start talking that way. I'd say stop using profanity. For some reason, we do that if we think it helps.
Yeah, it somehow makes us look better, or
cool,
makes us
or normalize
exactly.
us, or at least less disarming to people. It's okay. Don't look at things when people send them on your phone. Say, look at my phone. Say, no, thank you. I don't look at anything on anybody's phone, because they used to hand me stuff that's the most inappropriate, horrible stuff.
Yeah,
why are you sending this to me? And I think the last thing I would say is just, you know, if we're searching for the right spouse, it's okay to say, I'm looking to be in love with a woman and have a family with that woman.
Yes.
Let's start saying that out loud.
Amen.
And then if we're married to that woman, say, I love my wife and nothing else matters.
Praise God. Chris, what a blessing. I am so grateful. Where can all men who are listening find out about all the great stuff you're doing? I mean, there's so many things.
Thanks so much. At AquinasWealth.com, they would find several things. They'd find all the faith and finance score. They could take that scoring. They'd find out about the book from Faithful
Sophia,
Finance,
Sophia,
and they'd find all about Catholics at the Shore next year. We'd love to have them down here next year.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Wow, what is such a blessing to be with you here. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for coming on the show and talking through this stuff. It's so important. What a joy. So, Chris, you, Molly, your family, all your endeavors, they're in my prayers.
God bless you. Thank you so much. Great being with you.
Well, as we end each of our episodes, be a man, be a saint.